poetry workshop in Albany. And I wasn't going to tell this part, but now I'm going to. We were sitting next to a. Whoa! I thought I had this other one on. It's all right. I can. I don't know. Can I? There we go. Okay, so we're at this table all day with all these other poets. We're going to go back to our home libraries. I'm there from Holland Patton with the friend of the library that we had at that point. And we had a woman sitting between us who had the worst cold I've ever seen anybody have in my life. And all she did was blow her nose. And when they brought us breakfast, I've been criticizing this woman for 26 years. I'm such a bad person. She poured orange juice on her cornflakes, and I almost died. But anyway, I didn't die. Instead, I rushed out and I bought Patrick's book, which I was supposed to get the laugh for because it's a great title. A Drowning Man Is Never Tall Enough. Who could read a title like that and not love the title, the book, and the poet? So I have bought everything I can of Patrick since then, including this little one that I think has maybe got Patrick on it with his little banjo when he was a little kid. Thought I'd show you that. So what a amazing thing. So 26 years ago, I don't know. I just keep buying the books when I can find them. And then all of a sudden, Will says, Patrick Lawler is going to read at our space. I was like, Patrick Lawler. So because of Tom Townsley and Phil Memmer and Will, I run into Patrick again. But I want to tell you something about this book. I bought the book, I read the book, I underlined, as I always do, everything I liked. And then I wrote this enormously long letter to Patrick telling him everything I liked. I might have just as well sent the book because it was entirely underlined. But right now, I opened it up today to find this. It says, favorite line, and there's a star. And my favorite line is, without my thinking it is winter all by itself. It will be spring. And those of you to whom I give my Christmas calendars, I wanted you to know that that's the first ever quote I ever used. The first time I ever made a calendar, I used Patrick's quote for it. And when Patrick was going to come in December, I said, oh, I'll give you this year's calendar. And then he got sick and couldn't come. And so he's here now, and he's got 6 months left on his calendar.
Thank you.
The other thing I'm going to tell you is that in addition to all this incredible poetry, Patrick has made a film called An Arrow at Rest in Every Instant of Its Flight. Another amazing title. And this film is going to be showing at the Edinburgh Film Festival in Scotland. So congratulations, Patrick. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
I will let you browse my multitude of books, but you can't take any of them. And without further ado, Mr. Lawler.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you so much, Ruth and Will. And this is such a great place to be. This is my third scheduled reading, but only the second one that I've actually attended. The second one, and I apologize anybody who was making plans to attend that one, but I had laryngitis. And so and I've never had laryngitis in my life. I was walking like this, and you would not have enjoyed that reading. So anyway, I feel really connected to this place. I think my whole life I've been from the other side. So this book, I want us to consider, first of all, the subtitle. Where the heck's my book? Oh, maybe you did. Oh, yes, exactly. So this is the book we're reading from, okay? And Will did an amazing job, and Colleen, his wife, did the cover of the book, which I really love. But there's kind of a history of this book, which I don't even know if Will is fully aware of. But the subtitle of this book is "The Poem That Used to Be a Novel before it was a script, before it was a poem. Okay, so that's the subtitle. This book started a quarter of a century ago in 2000. I wrote a novel that was, I thought, an amazing accomplishment. And I sent it out to how many people? 15, I think 15 agents. And I received 7 letters to submit the novel. And what I've discovered was I am a great query letter writer, but not such a great novelist. Because when they saw the novel, they said, no, sorry. Go back to writing your query letters. So it's taken me a quarter of a century to write this book. So if you figure there are 68 poems in this book, 68, 6-line poems. I generally write very long sort of work for the most part. But that means there are 408 lines in this book. So over the last 25 years, written in 8,125 days, I basically average 1 line of a poem every 20 days. That's the math. But now the history of the book. So this is unlike any other work I've ever done. I usually have very performative sort of pieces that, hopefully engage the audience, kind of take you on a roller coaster ride. And these are more thoughtful, quiet, deep, provocative poems in some ways. And I love these poems. And so from now on, I'm writing shorter and shorter poems. I've decided the closer I get to death, the less I actually want to say. But the original novel takes place in a town very much like the town where I grew up in, which is Jordan, New York, in west of Syracuse. And the main character takes a creative writing course, which I had taken at a community college, lives in a cellar, which I grew up in a cellar for 7 years as my father broke his back and our house was being, we were in the process of building a house and then it stopped. So for 7 years I was in a cellar. And so that was one of the characters. In the first chapter of the book, the grandfather dies. And we learn essentially that the whole book was actually written by the dead grandfather. It was the dream of the dead grandfather. So that's kind of the history. And so this captures some of the backstory is here, but without actually mentioning the backstory. So we'll talk more about that as we go on. One of the reasons I think that there was such a positive response to my query letter was I started the query letter with the first line of the novel, which is also the first poem in the book. When you've got something good, you stick with it. So this is called Talking About Death. The first rule is, every time I talk about death, I must also talk about sex, which makes some people feel very uncomfortable, especially when I attend funerals. Sorry for your loss, but hey, your spouse looks great. So I learned a lot. And this is a poem called Light Comes Out of a Hole. My brother and I, little Mike, my brother and I dug holes in the backyard. All our childhood lives, I guess, for like 5-6 years. And we would dig a hole. My father would fall in it. Somebody would tell us to fill the hole. Said, get your father out first. So, but anyway, I don't know if we were trying to hide something or find something. I don't know. I never could figure it out. But it was an activity I guess when you don't have a lot, digging a hole is entertaining. But anyway, light comes out of a hole. Religion is something to explain the hole that is being dug in the backyard. With holes in his hands, Jesus is brought into the hospital. There is a hole inside my Father's head where the eye fits. Illness is the body telling us its story. Don't tell anybody, Jesus says. So, the starving. The starving. My sister played church music all the time. We're in the cellar, right? But but she was the organist for the local Catholic church, St. Patrick's Church, and she always was practicing church music on a piano that we had, and it was like, oh God, it was god awful haunting. Oh, don't show that to my sister, by the way. Okay, the starving. Listening to a God-sad music that swirls around her like bees, the sister keeps a diary of all her future stitches. She knows music can cut. The honeybees do their dance to tell everyone where the food is. In this world, in spite of all the music, we can't stop starving. So, eco-erotica. I just like the title. I have no idea how it connects to the poem, but it's a good title. Anyway, but so as I said in the novel, and this is where things start getting a little confusing because there's my life, there's the novel, there's the poetry, there's a script, what I haven't even talked about yet, but there's that too, and there's all this kind of interweaving of all this stuff. But anyway, in the novel, the grandfather dies, as I said in the beginning, and then becomes, we find out at the end that it's actually the dreams of the dead grandfather that have, that is actually the novel. So, right through the burlap sack of the heart, the grandfather is punctured by roots. We touch the part of the self that stays buried in sleep, while forgetfulness settles on the furniture, memory slides into the tiny cup of the navel. The small boy finds a chrysalis in the field. Eco-erotica. Yeah. You can use that title yourself sometime, and you don't have to write anything that even relates to it. Two broken things. We bang against each other as if we were two broken things in a storm. Mathematically, it has been proven that there is an answer, but we can never know it. What we do know, God is waiting behind a spigot full of fire and song and looks exactly like water. So, this is a poem called The Book of Leviathan. It refers to three characters who are in the novel and don't appear again, I don't think, in the poems, but they do play a significant role in the novel. So there's the librarian, and the librarian, she's obsessed with erasing all of the genitalia in the books in the library. From art books to medical books, she just finds it appalling that anybody would actually do that, you know. So the mayor, who happens to be her boss, okay, sees this and says she must draw them all back. So for the rest of the novel, Serafina, is her name, she's drawing genitalia. So there is another character in here. It's the funeral director who has gelastic seizures. Do you know what a gelastic seizure is? It's it's a seizure, but it's with uncontrollable laughter. So, sorry for your loss, really. and laughing away. And so, and there's a doctor who makes up diseases for his patients that he wants to see, you know. So, but anyway, they're referred to here, but not in much detail. The Book of Leviathan. The library is the town's unconscious, captured in a quiet, slightly elevated place. The town is full of unexpected transactions. The funeral director has his scholastic seizures, while the doctor flaps his arms and discusses diseases associated with light. The stone statue grows heavier at first. Later, they too rise up slightly on their granite toes. Yeah, the Book of Leviathan should have been the Book of Levitation, I think, right? So, magic, okay. Essentially, all writing is something like a love story, right? It involves two things. It's magic, because it captures the essence of our existences, which is magical, right? And also a love story, trying to connect us to the world around us. So this is a poem called Magic. The magician creates a dialogue between darkness and light. He designs his lover's death dress, where she'll make love for the last time. We are each other's stories, they say. And they reveal the creaturely parts, the consecrated places. She is always pregnant and always giving birth. The magician pulls a dark part of himself out of a squashed hat. Yes. So this is based on a true story. Doesn't appear in the novel, doesn't appear in the script, and really doesn't appear much in this poem, but it is there. It's in back of it all, right? But it's a true story. So my father, it refers to the last book, which initially was the first title of the novel that never got published, right? It was called The Last Book. So, but anyway, my father wanted me to write his autobiography. And I thought, why? My father had an elevated view of himself, and he did have a broken back, right? But he was an alcoholic, and it was sad in a way, but he loved my writing. He just loved the fact that I was a writer. And at the end of his life, he started writing stories. And it was amazing. It was amazing. So I bought him a dictionary. But it was very moving and stuff. They were not that good. I do have them still, but they were not that good. But anyway, this is a true story. So he asked me to write this I'm pretty young, right? The last book. Light bears the impression of everything it touches. After the father begged me to write the last book, I refused. But I didn't know it would have saved him. Or maybe I did. What are we to do with the fullness of the heart when the anecdotes we are given are inadequate containers? Fuck you, says the father. Okay. So this is a book called a poem called "I've Always Been Confused." I've always been dancing. I'm sorry. I've always been confused as something I. But anyway, I've thought visual aids are helpful with this kind of stuff. So this is my life here. I write a novel called Dance in the Dream House, right? Then it doesn't get published. 15 years later, I write a script called Dream in the Dirthouse. Right? And this is, again, everything is getting intertwined here. Then, through Will's vision, this gets published as poems called Dance in the Dirthouse. Now what? And that's what we'll be discussing and as the night goes on.
And to bring that in for those of you who want to a sponsor.
Yeah, I will really seriously be talking more about this. But anyway, I've always been dancing. This is the house where the dying go to live. You need to listen outside the door to hear the choking, the resurrected red root of electricity. Together we give birth to mirrors, and we listen to the beat of the heart. Death is a house with unlocked doors. Now, I'm trying to, is this the poem, my life? But this is facing a forest fire with a garden hose. Fire was always fascinating in my house because my grandmother on my father's side, house burnt down twice. Yeah, it was down twice. So something was going on there. And I had several uncles who were volunteer firemen, that kind of thing. You know, I don't know. Maybe they just needed a job. But in the novel, one of there are spontaneous fires that start all over the place, right? At various times. In a bird bath, actually, it's mentioned. Some of this is in the, in a wash basin, in a choir loft, the organ, the pipe, just okay. But anyway, so this is facing a forest fire with a garden hose. This is just a phrase I'm going through. It is a full-time job to put out the fires and a part-time job to start them. Something is always burning in the town. Grass fires, barns, hotels, grease fires, glass fires, bird baths. Gulls spin on strings in the smoke-filled windows of the school. Yeah. Just a little creepy when you think about it. Okay. The God who swallowed a house. Should I say this first? I guess so, yeah. So in the novel, okay, in my life, I took creative writing class. Okay, I went to Lemoyne College. I dropped out. I was an accounting major. I thought, what the heck? I had these ledger books and stuff, and and the accounting professor called me into his office at the end of the semester and said, I'm going to pass you in this class on one condition. You never, ever take another accounting course. And I said, okay. And then he goes, because you hate it. Oh, you got it. So I thought, well, I communicate well, Maybe it was those little things I would write in the ledgers. I hate this. So anyway, I went to Auburn Community College. Auburn Community College, a small little school, and I took creative writing there, and I thought, I like this. This is something I can really do. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know there was actually an official way of learning it, And then when I went back to Lemoyne, I fell in love with it. So it took me 10 years to graduate from Lemoyne. They actually retired me. I was the first retired student they gave. Okay, so anyway, and there was this story about a professor, and I cannot, for the life of me, find out where I had seen this or read it. But a professor who was a professor / poet who was fairly well known, and this young graduate student doing research, wound up locating this professor in South America, not even sure exactly where, but Brazil, let's say, okay? And finds this professor in this house, this abandoned house, writing poems all over it, all on the inside, you know, and he was naked. Yeah, of course. So, picture it. It's like, amazing. I wanted to capture that kind of energy in my novel. It was not good. It wasn't a great, but I think I did a little bit in this. Maybe I don't. But anyway, the God who swallowed a house. There is a God who is so big and so everywhere, there isn't one. My grief is imaginary for imaginary people. The physical body consists of the entire universe, or at least the solar system, or a moon of a minor planet. Once there was a house with poems written on its inner skin, and one of them was called Door. So, let's see. I think this poem just kind of captures a lot of who I am. Now, when I share the title, I think you'll get that. But I'm going to have a drink of water. Somebody asked if we were going to have a break, and I said no, but I think we will. Okay, now, back from break. So this title, I think, is like, the most Zen-like thing about me is I know nothing of Zen. The funeral home is at the end of the road. The world is unfinished. I carry a darkness in my belly. I lose my grip on fantasy. The thinker lives inside the thought. The thought lives inside a fossilized raindrop. It is solar lighting in a cave full of bones. I think I thought that this is not that is not this. I wish I could carry a light in my belly. So, this is another title that could probably kind of be indicative of my whole life, and it's actually should appear maybe on my tombstone. I live my life in order to impress my lover's psychologist. Love is when you join your dyings together. I love you, I love you. At what point does the traveler become the road? With his camera crying light, the photographer takes a picture of a dream. At what point does the lover become the loved? The sister brings a jar of fireflies to the gravesite. We know we have to dance out on the ledge until we learn to fly. Okay. There's also all these salesmen who come to town in the novel, right? And I think this is really more in the script. They come, and one of them is the God salesman, and he comes, but there are other salesmen too. Phenomenological doodlings. When the God salesman comes to town, we see the light at the end of the carpal tunnel. While turning darkness into a holy book, he carries a glass suitcase. With snow shaken over the town, it is as if nothing will ever be real again. Yeah, I could tell you the story of the carpal tunnel, but I think you got it. So this is about really kind of taking a creative writing class, which I told you kind of saved my life. So, a chronicle of things that didn't happen. I'm afraid of stopping because then I will have to read what I have written. This is the sound a lock makes. In the window, the room crushes the moon. The woman's hair is braided into a noose. What I don't know would fill a book. See? I have a little note beside this that says expand, but I have no idea what that means. So, as if someone play. As if someone plays a radio in a grave. Okay. At what point in the novel does the protagonist taste the lover's tears? At what point in the novel does the dead grandfather state that he is alive, writing all of this down with one hand, erasing it frantically with the other? And I think that I should expand on that. But I won't. I mean, you get 6 lines. What more do you want, right? Okay, this is related to my life. Remember the chart? Okay. So it's my life, and it's I worked before I graduated. I thought, well, you know, what do I want to do? I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I thought I want experiences, right? Right. So I thought, what better thing to do than to work on a psych floor, right? And to be helpful, but to understand humanity. I was an orderly in a regular hospital, but also this, and it was like, man, it opened my eyes to the incredible nature of humanity, right? And it was amazing. So this was a time on the psych floor. The bandages catch fire. On the psych floor, they taught us to dance. A bride in bare wires acquired the musical stain. During the autopsy, they took out the soul first and weighed it in order to determine the heft of God. This is where the insane take their wings off. Yeah, well, I was told, it was in lunchtime, I'm handing around trays, and I'm 19 or so. You know, this is right after I had dropped out of college. And so I'm handing around trays, and they're looking at me. I mean, I'm a kid, right? And they're looking at me like, oh my God, what's wrong with this kid? They said, you were so afraid. You're so afraid. He says, we're just people. We're just people with problems, you know, with extraordinary problems. And it's like, okay, I get it. And the rest of the time was amazing, right? Yeah, yeah. So, okay. A strange sky grows over us. The universe beats like the heart in an anatomy book. Pick a cardiologist, any cardiologist. Reality is another language I haven't learned. I write toward what I don't know. Tomorrow isn't possible. Yesterday didn't happen. These are only 2 of the lies we have to believe. So there is more in my more recent project, but there are rules. Remember the first rule? Every time you talk about death, you must also talk about sex, right? Remember that? If you believe with anything, keep that in mind, right? So, but almost every chapter had the rule. The first rule is, right? And so it had a pattern to it. It was like really, really good. And this one kind of captures a lengthier version of one of those. Making love in a canoe under the Milky Way. The first rule is, every time you make love, do it as if it were your first time, with that kind of tenderness and innocence and enthusiasm. The first rule is, every time you make love, do it as if it were your last time, with that kind of purposefulness and resolve and dedication. Make it last into infinity. Yeah. So, Okay. Now, so I'm going to move to that big question mark. How are we doing as far as time, by the way? 10? So, okay.
You're doing fine.
Okay, all right. Okay, so there's another evolution of the book, okay, of this book. So there was, if you remember, Dance in the Dream House, Dream in the Dirt House, Dance in the Dirt House. The next is Dream in the Dance House, right? And so I kind of made a joke of this in a reading I did at the Y, because there is the novel, the script, and the poems, right? And they said, what's the next step? I go, flash fiction. So what I'm doing is writing a flash novel, which includes all of the poems in this book intersected with flash fiction from the novel, the script. And they'll all be interwoven together. What do you think about that? Yeah. So I'm going to read you a little bit of that, okay, just to get a flavor of it, and you'll see where that goes, and then we'll go back to the book and end that. Okay. If I were to write a novel, that's the first section. A large, sterile, wet, white chemical plant looms over the landscape. Edam Chemical Company is emblazoned on its side. In the background is the forest, solemnly anticipating. A web of mycelium covers the forest floor. It's a network of entangled fibers spread as far as the eye can see. In the library, a large globe lies on the floor, cracked. Serafina stands over it, slowly bending to pick it up. She rolls it in her hands, finding the fracture. She runs her fingers along it. The crack splits Mesopotamia, cutting the valley in half. She finally picks it up. You see, I have the literary life in my blood. The grandfather, Patrick Rose, taught a creative writing class at the community college and wrote poetry. And he even wrote some poems after he died. But that's a story for another time. I really realize some issues here. As far as the eye can see, it's a cliche. The crack and Mesopotamia, a little bit too metaphoric, and perhaps a hint of the erotic. If I were to write a novel, this is how I would start it. It would be in a town named Edam, a family named Rose, and a dreaming pill named Lucidia, which is a big part of this new thing. I've been trying to not write this story for years, as if I'm trying to run from it. There are many first rules, and this is just another. The first rule is, what you are running toward is the exact same thing we are running from. And so this will continue. So this book will never end. It'll never end. But this reading will. Thank God, right? So I want to read you two final poems. So in some ways, this is a book that is eating a man, rather than man eating a book, right? A book eating a man, and that's what this is. A flower dreams the butterfly. Butterflies are pieces of sunlight, hinges of astonishment. The night is buttoned by the moon. In the light, the bee guzzles. A man eats a book, while the termite saunters away with a house inside its mouth. Once the butterfly binged on flowers. That, and then the last poem, that's when the dead start dancing. Swimming in the thick elements of time, we eat the worm and throw away the apple. Hunger and strangeness metabolizing. The world smells of sweet sawdust. It takes a deep breath and waits at the end of the exhausted dirt road. That's when we realize we've always been dancing. And And one final acknowledgement, because Will said, do you want anybody to write on the back of your book, and any other authors or whatever? I go, well, I want something that I really memorable. I'd like to do it. So I wrote it. I didn't want to take a chance, right? And so I wrote the final 6-line poem as the final acknowledgement. It is time for me to acknowledge all that I have not acknowledged before. According to panpsychism, everything has a mind. And so at last, I want to acknowledge everything. Everything in its benevolence, its bountifulness, its beauty. Thank you, everything, for, well, being everything. Thank you, everybody. Sure. Yeah. I don't have a whiteboard for that, though, but I could put a
The novel is complete, the original novel.
The original novel is right here.
Can you publish it?
No!
Well, we have to talk about that. And frankly, Patrick does such a great job talking about it. All of them are great. I really don't understand how he didn't get it published. But, they were looking for something different. And, when were you trying to publish that?
It was 2000. It was year 2000. Yeah. Yeah.
So, fiction hit some blows.
Oh yeah, it did. And they wanted commercial stuff. They wanted stuff that would sell, and this was artsier. I had some people love it. Some did love it, but some said like, yeah, you're going to be, this is as good as Faulkner. But
I think so. So that's a question. How did you take it through this process? Did you use like components straight out of the novel for the script and then revise, or did you just take an idea from it? I mean, what was this revisionary process like?
So the script, because it had been around a while, and for maybe 5 years, I thought I could actually publish it, but it didn't get published. But then I realized, that it could be improved, but I didn't know if I was ready to do that yet. So when I approached, because I was working with a scriptwriter, a director, and we've had some pieces published, and he said, do you have anything that you want to share? I go, yeah. So basically rewrote the first episode of the novel, like made a script out of it, and it was really good. Again, never got produced, but it re-inspired me. And then with the poems, the book of poems, it was so this book of poems, I did not say this. These poems, these lines were things that didn't make the novel. This was like culled from. So I never throw anything out. Okay, I remember I had said, maybe when I was like 30, I said to some of my friends, if I never had another idea, it wouldn't matter because I would still have all this stuff to write. And they go, really? And so it was probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 or so, I discovered 2 boxes of stuff from notebooks and notes and just all this stuff about, to things to write. And it was like, are you kidding me? This is amazing. So part of that whole process is that I've reworked things, and they evolve and change me in some ways too, so that I approach them differently. So did the whiteboards help? Thank God, right? You wouldn't have known it was over. Yes.
So this is my first introduction to your work. I'm getting a sense of the wisdom literature traditions, as well as surrealism in there. Are there any? What's some of your see yourself as part of a tradition, or?
Yeah, there's definitely a surrealistic aspect to it, but I've always had that kind of grounded, I think, in in this case, location and character. You know, not so much in the poems, but in the other. But there's a strong influence of that, and magical realism. That definitely. So, and some of those authors I love. I absolutely love. So, but poets, God, there's so many good poets. Yeah. So, that it?
Well, this is
Yeah.
kind of a personal question. You mentioned you dug holes as a boy, and you also mentioned your father fell into them, and you also mentioned your father broke his back. And in my mind, I was thinking,
Oh, I left the clues, and you. Oh my God, yeah. I do belong in jail. No, my father actually broke his back in a welding accident. Yeah, and because he was a welder at a chemical company. That's why chemical companies always pop up in my things, because they treated my father like crap. They didn't want to give him nothing, you know. And in those days, right, in the 50s, you know, you could do that. You could get away with that stuff. And yeah, so he was on disability. He couldn't even get disability. Yeah, until I don't know, 10 years afterwards, maybe. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, and he walked around. He had this brace that was in those days those hard, like a shell thing, and it was, oh my God, it was creepy, you know. Yeah, for a kid to see, but hmm? Oh yeah, my mother was amazing. Yeah, all of the religious elements that I have in my work, a lot of that comes from my mother and her connection to the church and all that. Yeah, and a real genuine Christian, not a not a fake one. So
That's why I think
yeah.
resonates with me with when you sent me the manuscript. So nobody had published some of the poems that are in the collection previously.
Mm-hmm.
But when you sent me the full book, what resonated with me was some of that material you're talking about. This sort of archetypal,
Yeah.
mystical relationship to
Mm-hmm.
the world and God. Like
Yes.
the poem you read early on where you're talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'm a nurse too, so that's
Sure.
like,
Oh yeah.
with that
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this just hits on a very visceral level.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope everybody is going to enjoy the book. If you bought a copy, if you haven't, there's more back there.
Yep.
Oh, Ruth, go ahead.
Ruth.
Well, I read the book when it first came out, and I loved it, and I still love it. And I'm interested in a question. Knowing all the background is amazing, but the book worked without it.
Yes.
So now I'm going to take it home and read it again and see how I
Yes. Some supernatural power did not like that.
Sorry about that.
Well, thank you for saying that, Joe. Yeah. Because there's, well, you know, I have never been one, and when I read here the first time, I don't think I said anything between poems, hardly at all, because the poems themselves were, you know, I'm a strong believer in the fact that the poems have to stand on their own, or the writing has to stand on its own. But in this case, there was so much interconnected to everything that I had done for 25 years that I thought, oh man, and that makes it, I think, more compelling and really more significant in the long run. So, yeah. So thank you for enduring my stories. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Will. Janet. So, there we go.